Hey, it's Ellie. Welcome back to another video. Today, as you can see, I am doing another tier ranking video. I have decided to go through and rank every book that I've read so far in 2020. I'm really excited to do this. I've been wanting to talk about books on my channel for a while, and I actually recorded an entire video reviewing every single book that I read in 2019, but it got corrupted and I had a bunch of issues with it. By the time I was able to get it fully rendered, it was like April. But I'm going to go through now and talk about all the books that I've read so far this year. It hasn't been a very good reading year for me because I've been doing university and working this year as well, so I've not got a lot of time on my hands, but I did get through some books, and as you might be able to tell, I read across genres, so this is going to be a really interesting tier ranking. Before I get started, first of all, sorry about the cat. She doesn't like it when I close the door, but she's a naughty cat, and she can't be in here when I'm recording, otherwise it'll be much worse than this. So, yeah, for my tiers, I've got the first two are pretty self-explanatory. New faves and enjoyable. Both good categories. The third category I've named trash I like. Because here's the thing. I'm not very picky about my books. I can find enjoyment in books that have a lot of flaws. But I'm not totally ignorant to the flaws in books. It's just a matter of whether I can look past them and enjoy the story for whatever reason that might be, and there are various reasons. So I made this category for books that are very, very flawed and that I've still enjoyed. Then after that we've got meh, which is probably more of the flaws, less of the enjoyment, and then finally the not good tier, which I didn't want to name it anything worse than this because, let's face it, all opinions are subjective when it comes to art, and books are art. So, yeah, not good. Not good to me. Just to clarify, this is not a blanket statement that I'm calling these books horrible. Just not good to me. So let's get started. The first book we've got is Enchanted. Now, I really enjoyed this book. I have a confession to make. I grew up watching the movie with Anne Hathaway, and I've never read the book before this, so in watching the movie, I really liked the movie, but I realize now that it is such a horrible adaptation, and they just dumbed everything down for the movie, and I feel badly about that because this book is actually quite clever. I'm not sure if this is technically a middle grade or a YA genre book, but either way, it's really nice in the fact that it doesn't talk down to its audience. Ella has very intelligent and clever remarks. She has skills. She's like a really capable linguist, for example, and she uses that skill throughout the book to help her get out of problems. It's a really nice book. I think I'm going to throw it in enjoyable. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily a new fave just because, well, I'm not the target audience for it, first of all. Not that that made it a bad read, but it was a little young. And then also maybe not a new fave because it was fairly short. The audiobook was about 4 hours, I want to say, so not a very long book, but still very enjoyable. Next up, we've got The Cruel Prince, which is a fantasy romance novel about a human, sisters. Is there 2 or 3? 3 sisters, I think. 3 sisters who are living in the world of the fairies, and our main character, Jude, is kind of intertwined with the Prince of Fairies. There's this whole, I'm not going to explain plot in this book because that takes too long. Just look it up if you want to know what these books are about. But my opinion on this book is I have no idea. So this is definitely one of those flawed romance books. I'll say that right off the bat. There's some things in this that I was just kind of like, wait, what? A lot of things, actually. and I didn't fully understand Jude's motivations throughout this, so I had some problems with that. And then, I don't know. I did enjoy this book, but I don't know if it's a trash I like kind of enjoyment. I think it's more of a meh. I'm going to throw this in meh, because I did enjoy it. I would like to read the second one. It's a trilogy, I believe, so I will continue on with this series, but I felt like this had more potential than I found in the novel. Like, the concept of it, the human in the fairy world, something unique about the fairies in this world, and I think it pulls from folklore about fairies, but the fairies aren't able to lie, so they always have to tell the truth, and I was hoping there would be more, cleverness with that aspect of them, but it didn't really come up too often, I felt like. Except she knew that they were always telling the truth, and people mistrusted her as a human because she could lie. But that was, I don't know, it didn't seem like a main conflict, and it definitely could have been. So, yeah, I'm gonna just throw this in meh and call it good. The next book is Fire, which this is technically the second novel of the Graceling series, which is a book that I will also review later because I read that one first, but these don't necessarily have to be read in order, so I'm just gonna read it now. This is another fantasy romance novel, and I think these books are really great because they do something that a lot of fantasy romance books do not do, and that is give equal or more important weight to the plot than the romance subplot, and I really appreciate that. I enjoyed both of these books a ton. I would say I'm going to put Fire in enjoyable, and I'm probably going to end up putting, I'm just going to grab Graceling right now, which is the first one. I'm going to put that one in new faves because Graceling was amazing. I love the introduction to the world in this. Fire was good as well. I don't think it was quite as strong as Graceling, but it was still a really great story. I love the characters, and this author is really good at writing fantasy romance novels that are equal parts plot and romance, which is what I want in a fantasy romance story. Next up, we've got Daughter of the Pirate King, and this one is not too difficult. I'm going to put it right in enjoyable as well. This is another fantasy romance novel. I swear I don't read all fantasy romance. This just happened to be the order that these came in. Another fantasy romance novel. This one about pirate, obviously, Daughter of the Pirate King. This wasn't a perfect book, but I would definitely say it's enjoyable. It has one of my favorite tropes, which is enemies to lovers. I just love that trope. Yeah, it was a fun little pirate story. I don't really have much to say about it. It's not, I did read the sequel, which I'll rate later, which wasn't as good, but anyway. Next up, The Maze Runner. And this one is actually a reread. So I don't know if I should technically put it in new faves, but considering that I've reread it now and enjoyed it just as much or more as the first time, I'm going to say it goes in the top tier. And yeah, I really like this book. I haven't read any of the sequels, so that's why I ended up rereading the first one, because I plan to reread the sequels now. I believe I have the next one. What's the next one? The Death Cure? I don't remember. Whatever the next sequel is to The Maze Runner, I've got that checked out on my library currently, so I will be reading that one very soon, but it's just a good book. The movie is actually not the worst adaptation for book-to-movie adaptations. So if you like the movie, maybe consider picking up the book, because it's much more in-depth and it's much cooler than the movie. Next book, Uprooted. This one, I'm just gonna, trash I like. We're putting it in this tier. So this is another fantasy romance novel that has a ton of flaws. I will give a brief plot synopsis for this. There is a main character named Ashka, I think is how you pronounce that, and she is chosen out of all the girls in her village to go live with this mysterious wizard for 10 years in his tower and learn magic from him. And they do this to protect the village from the evil forest that kind of borders the village. And I just, wow, the plot convenience in this book is staggering. Just absolutely staggering. Every single time there is a problem, it's just like mysteriously gone because Ashka can use this new or different magic and she'll just make it up as she goes. So there's basically no stakes throughout the entire novel. We hear all about how scary this forest is, how people that go in never come out, and if they do, they're really like messed up in the head and try to kill people and stuff. And wouldn't you know, Ashka goes in that forest not once, but twice, and then she comes out again perfectly fine because of the magic. And also, nearly everybody that goes in with her also comes out perfectly fine because of her magic. So yeah, no stakes in this one. All that being said, I still enjoyed this novel for some reason. I liked the writing, the way the magic was described. It was plot convenience, but I didn't hate what happened because of it. I just realized that there could have been different ways to solve this or more consequences if this was going to be the case, because it just felt so safe throughout the whole novel. But yeah, still enjoyable for me. Lots of flaws. It's going in the trash I like category. Next, a non-romance book, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And I liked this book. Where do I want to put this though? New faves or enjoyable? I think I'm going to throw this in new faves. Well, these books, I've read 3, 4, something like that now, and I don't know why I feel like this. Maybe it's the writing style, because they're just so to the point, and they break pretty much every rule that is in modern fantasy nowadays as far as the exposition dumps. I feel as though almost nothing happens inside the novel, but so much happens in the story. I can't explain it exactly. It's in both The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, this one and all the others, there is almost always a section in the books where the characters meet somebody and that new character ends up just explaining history for like so long. That's just a huge chunk of the novel. It's just one person telling the story of this lore, and then once in a while some of the other characters will be like, and then what happened? But yeah, it's you would never get away with that as a modern fantasy author, but it works in these novels. And so it feels, when I read them, it feels like it's almost like a break from this crazy, like, intricate storytelling. It's almost nice just to have someone narrate very bluntly what was happening, why something is so, like, there's no question about it. It's just different. It's different from a modern fantasy novel. You can definitely see why some people wouldn't like these, but I just found them very enjoyable. I like the story that was told in it, though, like I said, I almost feel like nothing really happens during the novels. It's very strange. It's just a very strange feeling to read these novels. They are literally all telling and no showing, and I guess that's what gets me, but it's kind of enjoyable at the same time, even though that's like the opposite of all advice that you hear from modern authors is show, don't tell. But C.S. Lewis just tells us this story, and I appreciate that. Okay, so next up we've got The Selection. And this, I don't even have to think about this one. Straight and trash I like. This book is such trash. Oh my god, this is such a, oh wow. So, I mean, look at the cover. Look at the covers for these. And the 2 sequels that I also read because they're trash I like. The first one is definitely more of a trash I like than the second 2. I'm actually not sure if I'm going to put the second 2 in this tier or some of the lower tiers, but okay, let's talk about The Selection. Okay, so this book series follows our main character named America Singer, who is entered into the selection, which is a competition of sorts with, what is there, like 30 girls? I can't remember how many started because they were pretty much all irrelevant except like 2 of them. And yeah, it's basically like The Bachelor. The prince gets to pick one of the girls out of however many there were and marry her. She becomes the new queen and they live happily ever after. The end. Except, of course, there's gotta be a love triangle in this, because otherwise the story would be way too simple. America is harboring feelings for her hometown boyfriend, who, wouldn't you know it, ends up coming to the castle too for reasons that are completely and just utterly ridiculous. Yep. So this is one of those books that you just kind of, you love to read it because it's so awful. Does that make sense? I started reading the book and I had no idea how the author was planning to make this into a 3-book series, because literally the entire story could be over at the end of book 1, very simply, like super easily resolved at the end of book 1. But no, she had to split it up into 3 books. So The Selection was one plot line, the kind of interaction between America and the other girls, which again, only like 2 of them were ever really important. There was like a mean one who was getting on everybody's nerves. I can't remember what her name was, but for some reason she got a redemption arc, even though she literally put glass in somebody's shoes. Like, what? You don't get a redemption arc. You're a mean person. That goes way beyond, you know, pranking the girls, trying to get ahead in the competition. That is just straight up cruel. And then we're supposed to like this character at the end. She apologized, but like, no, sorry, honey, I'm not buying it. There is also a rebellion plot that the girls are now all involved in because they have ties with the crown, and that one got resolved in a really unique and interesting way. I'm being completely sarcastic. Here's what happened. The rebellion came up to the prince and said, "We'll stop the rebellion as long as you marry America Singer, the main character." And so guess what happened with that one? That was the sound of a plot line flying into the wind, never to be heard from again. Okay. Also, America Singer is basically the worst main character I have read in a while. So, all around, a very flawed and not great book. But I enjoyed it because, I don't know, it was just a stupid enjoyable read that I kept thinking, how can this get any worse? And then it would get worse, and that made me enjoy the book. This book uses all the tropes in the most bland and worst sort of way, and I loved it. Okay, let's move on. Next up we've got 11/22/63, and I'm sorry to all Stephen King fans, but I did not like this book. In fact, I didn't like it so much that I didn't even finish it, even though I read a good chunk of this, and that's why I included it in the review, because if I had DNF'd it early, I wouldn't rate it. That's not fair to a book. but because I read so much of it and just got frustrated with it, I didn't like it. I decided to stop reading because I just was having not an enjoyable time at all. And there's a lot of reasons for that. First of all, just the entire premise. It wasn't the time traveling that bothers me. In case you don't know, because I feel like this is relevant in my criticisms. 11/22/63 follows a guy named Jake, I think. Is that his name? Oh my god, I can't even remember. Whatever. He finds a portal that will allow him to time travel into, I believe it's the late 1950s. I can't remember the exact year, but it's several years before the assassination of JFK, which happens on 11/22/63. Another character that our main character kind of knows convinces our main character to use the portal, stay in the past for several years so that he can stop the assassination of John F. Kennedy and then change the course of the world. So the idea is that preventing John F. Kennedy's assassination will make the world better, and then he can return to the present and enjoy his new life or whatever. Okay, so alright, I'm on board with that. Let's see what kind of time travel shenanigans this guy can get into, and what he's gonna do to stop the assassination, etc., etc. That is not the story that I got. I was expecting this kind of cool time travel story, and what I got was the dude going back into the 50s and just milling about for several years doing absolutely nothing. He's apparently trying to stalk Oswald, the murderer of John F. Kennedy. But Oswald literally isn't even in the country for the first couple of years this novel takes place in. He takes a job as a teacher and basically does nothing for the first half of the novel. And then somewhere around the halfway point of the book, he meets his love interest. And I was just so done with the book at that point. I did not want to read about a love interest and a romance in this novel. I was ready for something significant to happen in the plot that was going to affect our overarching goal, which was, stopping the JFK assassination. But instead, we're taking some huge detour to talk about how he falls in love with a woman in the 60s. And I was so over it. I stopped the book at that point. And I actually did something that I have literally never done in my entire history of reading novels since I was in kindergarten and even before. I've always been an avid reader. I've never done this. I decided to skip through and just continue reading closer to the end. And you know what I got? More romance nonsense. Nothing happening. Then I guess he moved next door to Oswald and was listening to him with a microphone, which was just super riveting. Not really. It was the worst, most boring plotline ever. So at that point, I was done with the novel. I put it down for good. I did look up the ending online. I read a very detailed synopsis of how the book ends and all the loose ends that it ties up, and I have to say that I don't feel the need to continue reading to read that for myself. It's just, I don't know. I was invested at the beginning somewhat, but then he just lost me. He just lost me completely through all of this meandering. The book could have been like the first 10 chapters and the last 5 chapters, and I feel like the story would have remained exactly the same. Let's move on to the next book, which is Daughter of the Siren Queen. This is the sequel to Daughter of the Pirate King, and this one I didn't enjoy quite as much as the original one. I'm not sure if it's still enjoyable or in the meh. I'm gonna say this one goes in the meh, because this book took some turns that I was not thrilled about as far as the plot goes. It expanded on some elements that were pretty cool in the original book, but I just didn't really like the way that they were expanded on in the sequel, so yeah, I'm gonna say meh for that one. It wasn't a bad book by any means, and I would consider it good, but not not on the level of these ones, let's just say that. So next book we've got is Sleeping Giants. This one was very unique, and I would have to say it's definitely gonna go up here in my new faves. I think the premise alone for this one is really cool, but the way that the book was formatted was also really interesting. So this follows a bunch of characters actually, as this mysterious giant robot is being discovered on Earth. All these pieces are separate and buried throughout Earth, but the team involved is finally uncovering them and putting them together and figuring out how this works. And it's pretty obvious that this giant robot was left by something that was not human. So there's some kind of extraterrestrial being who was on Earth at one point and left these robots buried in the ground. The entire book is about figuring out the deal with these robots, who left them, how they work, etc., etc. It's a really cool premise, and then the way that they tell the story is really cool in this book because it's told not in a narrative sense, but through things like interviews that you're hearing between two characters. I listened to the audiobook and it's got a full cast of characters, which is really cool. Love when audiobooks have that. But anyway, so you'll hear interviews between two of the characters, transcript for a video log or journal entries from these people. Sometimes there's government reports, things like that. So it tells the story in again, not a coherent narrative sense, but through the meshing of all these different characters and different ways that they are recording their thoughts and feelings at the time. It's a really unique book. I would definitely recommend you check it out if the premise sounds interesting to you, and I'm probably not doing it very much justice, but it was definitely one of my favorites of the year, so yeah, right there, new faves. Next up, we've got Caraval. This is another fantasy book that is about a magic circus. Pretty cool. I picked it up because the last book that I read about a magic circus was called The Night Circus, and that very quickly became one of my favorite books of all time. The writing in that is beautiful. So I decided to pick up another magic circus book, and this one was pretty good. I would say I'm going to put this one in enjoyable. I don't think it's a new favorite, but the twist ending was pretty good, and I have currently checked out the sequel at my library, so I'll be reading the sequel very soon. Okay, next we've got The Voyager of the Dawn Treader, which is the third book in the reading order of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe that I decided to go with, which I believe is the one that C.S. Lewis recommends. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not reading them in the order that they're listed on my library's website, but I know that can change also sometimes depending on which collection of the books you're reading. So the order I read them was The Lion, the Witch, the Wardrobe, Prince Caspian, and then The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, the third. And I am going to put this one, I'm going to put this one in new faves because I liked this one even more, I would say, than The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. This one, I felt, actually did have some things happen during the plot. It wasn't just somebody telling us the story the entire time. This one actually had some adventure elements to it, which I really enjoyed, and at one point one of the characters gets turned into a dragon, which is just amazing. It's one of my favorite scenes, I think, so far in this series. So yeah, I'm gonna say this one goes in new faves. Okay, next up I've got A Game of Thrones. This one is a reread. I've already read this entire series from start to finish, what's out right now. I've watched all of the TV series as well, and season 8 had me pretty disappointed, so I decided to read the book series again, even though I'm not sure we'll ever actually get a finish to this series. I hope so. Oh goodness, I really hope so. And I don't want to drag on George R. R. Martin for his work, because this, I'm sure, takes an insane amount of time to write and organize for all of these characters in the story. But yeah, the second time rereading A Game of Thrones, I think it's even better the second time around, because I know what's going to happen to these characters. So seeing their journey at the beginning is so, oh my gosh, little Arya trying to catch cats in King's Landing is just the highlight of the series, honestly. So I'm going to throw this one, I mean, again, technically not a new fave, but it is a favorite of mine because I'm reading it for the second time and I really enjoy the story. So yeah, I'm going to throw this one in the favorite category. Next up, we've got the sequel to Sleeping Giants, which is that sci-fi novel about the robots. The sequel was not quite as good as the original, so I'm going to put it in enjoyable. I did like it still. Still really good, but not quite on the level of the original with the intrigue and everything that was going on. Yeah. Yep. Okay, and then Prince Caspian, so that's second book out of 3. I put the first 2 in my new faves, but this one I think I'm gonna put it enjoyable because, again, same with the book I just rated. I just didn't think it was as strong as the original, and I didn't like it as much as the third one because, again, that one had a lot of adventure in it. So I think this one is just enjoyable. Still good, still a great addition to the series, but not quite as good. Next, The Book of Dust by Philip Pullman. So for those of you who don't know, this is a prequel series to Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials series. You might be familiar with the HBO TV show that just came out last year, or the really old movie called The Golden Compass, which is about the first book in the series. Not the best movie adaptation, to be honest, but honestly, not as bad as some people try to make it out to be. Just, these books are hard to adapt. I believe there's currently 2 books in the series. This is the first one, and oh my goodness, oh my goodness. So His Dark Materials is one of my all-time favorite series forever. The Golden Compass, I've read it multiple times. It's such a beautiful story. I can't believe we're getting adaptations for it, like an actual true adaptation that HBO is doing, because this book has so much religious symbolism, and it's not favorable, the views of religion in the series. So yeah, very surprised that we are getting a remake of this series for HBO, from HBO, I should say. And The Book of Dust, the prequel, it's just as good as the original series. This one really holds its own. It's about Lyra before she ends up at Jordan College during the floods, which is actually, I believe, one of the very first scenes in the HBO series. So basically everything before that is what takes place in The Book of Dust. And oh man, this author, he knows how to get me with the emotions. I feel like his books are the only books that I consistently cry at, because the endings are usually quite powerful, and there's some very dramatic thing that tends to happen at the end that just really pulls on your heartstrings, and it's just, yeah, definitely a new favorite. I would like to reread it very soon. I'm waiting for the sequel to become available at my library. I've got a 6-month wait. It's just insane. So, yeah. These books just destroy me. Anyway, moving on. Next, I read a contemporary novel, The Hate You Give. This is a pretty well-known novel. There was a movie adaptation not too long ago that I actually just watched the other day, and the movie adaptation holds up pretty well. I didn't think they changed a whole ton of the story. I'm gonna put this in enjoyable. This book is really powerful, and the message, I think, is really important, especially in today's cultural climate in the USA with everything going on right now. If you are looking to pick up a book that kind of deals with civil rights issues and police brutality, I would definitely recommend this one. Just does a really good job of making the point that it's trying to make. Next up, we've got The Elite, which is the sequel to The Selection, and I'm gonna put, man, where the heck do I put this one? I'm gonna put this one in trash I like, because again, I mean, it's this series. I don't, I'm just gonna get the final book for the series and put it in myth, though, because I had way more problems with the final book of the series than I did the first two, which, that plot thing going off into the wind, that happened in this one, and there were some other things that I was just like, okay, what is going on? Like, this series could have been one book. If you stretched it, it could have been two. The third one was not needed. That was too far. Too far. Also, she has like 6 other books also about the characters in this novel that are like standalones or separate. Just too many books. Too many. Alright, so next up we've got The Monster of Elendhaven. And this book, so I don't know where to put this, because this book so here's the thing. I picked this book up thinking that it was going to be like a thriller / horror novel. I wasn't really sure. It's called The Monster of Elendhaven. I'm like, yeah, it looks kind of creepy. The description on my library's website also made it seem like a horror novel. It talked about the monster of Elendhaven stalking around with his long fingers that want to wrap around the throats of people, and I'm like, yeah, let's read about this monster. And that is not the book that I got. This is a romance novel between the monster and his creator. It wasn't bad. I mean, it wasn't the worst book I've ever read. I would even say it was enjoyable, but it just threw me for some kind of loop when I was expecting this to be a scary story, and it actually was not. I don't know. I think, is this gonna be an enjoyable book? Maybe. It was enjoyable. I guess it's enjoyable. I mean, I did enjoy it. It just wasn't what I was expecting, and that was, strange. It was just, like, if you could have 2 genres that were further apart from each other and you weren't expecting one to turn into the other, I feel like it would be horror and romance. So yeah, I still don't even know how to process my feelings for this novel that I read. What a time. Just what a time. Okay, moving on. The Raven Tower. So, wow, this one definitely right up there in my new faves, because this book was so unique. So I don't want to give away any spoilers for this, and I feel like if I explain too much of the premise and the reason that this book was so unique, I will give it away. But this book, so first of all, this book is told in second person, which, if you aren't familiar, is the you said this, you did that point of view. So there's never an I or a they, he, she. It's always you, as if a speaker is talking to you about what you are doing. And that's something you don't read in fantasy hardly at all. Second person is mostly used for pick your own adventure stories and things of that genre. But this book partially tells the story in second person and then partially in first person. And again, I don't want to give away too much of the premise, because I feel like I feel like it's just something that you need to go in and experience for yourself. I know the second person can be a little jarring at first, but you do get used to it if you continue on, and then the first person sections definitely help break up that strangeness of just having an entire novel told in the second person, and you will understand at the end why that second person section exists, and just the way everything comes together at the end is phenomenal. Really, really great book. And last but not least, we have Waking Gods, which is the final book in the Sleeping Giants series, which is actually called the Themis Files. I don't think I mentioned that yet, but the entire series is called the Themis Files if you are looking it up. And I am going to put this one... I think I'll also put this one in enjoyable. It was a little better than the second one, but again, I didn't feel it quite had that cool intrigue that the first one introduces to, which it wasn't a bad book. As far as the entire series goes, this is very consistent in its storytelling and quality and enjoyment level. I know I rated this one higher and I keep saying it has more intrigue, but that's just because by the second and third book you kind of figured out everything about this giant robot, and that doesn't make the story less interesting. It's just not as much of a mystery anymore. But overall, strong series, completely through, and there isn't a single book that I would say was, a lot weaker than the other ones. I personally liked the second one the least, but I don't think it was any worse quality, again, as the other two. So yeah, I guess that's the end of the ranking, and looking through, I feel pretty happy with where I put everything. Maybe I might switch this one to not good. That one's debatable. So either way, it can go in the middle, let's say that. I feel like I've gotten pretty good actually at picking books that I will enjoy and DNFing the ones that I have a feeling I won't enjoy very quickly. So there's a couple books that I checked out and read maybe half an hour of before I decided to put it down, and those, I mentioned during my 11/22/63 rating that I wasn't going to rank books that I hadn't read a good chunk of because I don't feel like it's fair. So there it is. All the books I've read so far and what I thought of them. Hopefully this was somewhat coherent because I didn't plan ahead at all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to give it a like and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss my future content. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Until then, bye!